Hello, Primary 5 students. How are you? Welcome in your science class with me, Dr. شيماء حمدي قاسم, and your channel, the Big Sister channel. As now, we will study lesson 3 from concept 3, unit 1. So, let's start. Here we have lesson 3 from this concept. Activity 7, habitat loss. What the meaning of habitat loss? Habitat loss has the meaning of habitat is damaged or destructed, and this is because of the changes that happens in the ecosystem, as we will see now. So let's review what we already know about the habitat. Habitat provides the organisms with all the things they need to survive. Habitats provide the organisms with shelter, home, food, and water. We also studied that some human activities can change the habitats in the ecosystem, and we have examples like overfishing in seas and oceans, and throwing waste materials in water, and building up more buildings and roads, as by cutting down the forests and build instead of them buildings and roads. All of these are activities that change the habitats and may cause habitat loss. As you see here, as cutting down forests and overfishing from the seas and oceans, and plastic pollution or throwing waste materials into the seas and oceans. This is one of the human activities that harm the marine ecosystem, the marine habitat. Human activities also can impact the weather and non-living factors. What are the non-living factors? Yes, non-living things like water, air, temperature, land. All of these are non-living factors, and the human activities can affect these non-living factors and weather. You know, the human activities can make the weather changes, like the temperature increases or decreases, and we will know how. And this is just information for you to know how the human activities can impact the weather. As you know, the air pollution, that carbon dioxide that comes from the exhausts of factories and cars, these gases are harmful and they cause what known as global warming, as they make a shield or barrier. Okay, so they trap the heat around the earth. So the heat will be trapped around the earth. So this is causes the temperature to increase. So here we saw a human activity that causes change in the weather or change in the temperature. All these changes may cause habitat loss, as the human activities like cutting down trees in the forests, overfishing, and the changes in the weather by the human activities, all of these, and throwing plastic waste into the marine habitats, all of these may cause habitat loss, of course, and may cause extinction, as some animals will die and will not found again. Okay, So we have here a question: why healthy habits are important for all organisms in a food web? We know that the habitats provide living organisms with shelter, food, and water. So all living organisms need healthy habitats to get their needs. Okay? So it's very important to have healthy habitats for all living organisms in food web. So healthy habitat means good habitat without any destroys, without any damages. So, as we said, because habitats provide the organisms with the resources like food, shelter, water, and they need these resources to survive. As each species get its needs, so each species gets enough food in the food web, so it will survive, and the other species will be well survived also because they depend on each other for in feeding in the food web. Okay, but if the habitats are destroyed, are damaged, what will happen? Many organisms may not be able to survive, and this will negatively affect the food web because here we have organisms that may die in the food web or move to another habitat, so the other species will not get their needs. So all the food web will be affected by the destroying of habitats or habitat loss. And now we will take an example for habitat loss in the coral reefs. Those are the coral reefs. They are one of the most diverse and valuable ecosystem. As the ecosystem that contains coral reefs is a very diverse, means there is many kinds of coral reefs and valuable. Okay, so why this ecosystem is valuable, we will know. It is valuable because many people depend on the coral reefs as to increase the tourism, to bring the tourists, as they can come to our country to see the coral reefs by diving and swimming, and also they are used in some countries as they catch the coral reefs. Okay, so this is why it is valuable, as when the tourism increase in our country, so this as well increase the income of the country. So what we said, that coral reefs are important for tourism, as people travel to coral reefs for fishing or diving. These help increase the visitors and income of local hotels and restaurants and other businesses. Okay. And if you come to the coral reefs closely, so you will see the corals, which are small marine animals. So these are the corals which are small marine animals. We saw that the coral reefs are colorful. They have many colors, but something wrong that happens to the coral reefs make them lose its color and turns into white like that. And when they turn to this color white, so they are dying or they die. So this called coral bleaching. So what's the meaning of coral bleaching? As the coral lose its color. Okay. Here we have the word bleach, and bleach, as you see here, some products are used to make the clothes clean, but if they are used in colored clothes, what happens? The cloth will lose its color, like this t-shirt. So here, coral bleaching come from this meaning, as the coral reefs lose their colors. So the coral bleaching happens when the water temperature rises, increases. So when the temperature of the water increases, this is cause the coral bleaching. As you see here, this is the coral bleaching, and it happens because of the rising of temperature, water temperature. And we saw that the increasing in temperature may happen because of the climate changes or by the human activities. So here, when the temperature increases, it causes the coral bleaching. So how this happens? When the temperature rises, increases, the seawater becomes warm. So in the warm water, this is not good for the coral reefs, as the coral reefs will get rid from the algae living in their tissues. In the tissues of the coral reefs, there are algae. And when the water becomes warm, so the coral reefs will get rid from these algae. There is no algae, okay? And this causes the coral reefs to be bleached, and they don't survive when they turn into white, so they don't survive and they will die. So the question here, the loss of the coral reefs changes the ocean food web, of course, because the coral reefs are source of food and shelter to many kinds of many species of fish. When the coral reefs dying like that, coral bleaching happens. So this will affect the food web. So the destroying of coral reefs causes two things. One, for the people who depend on the coral reefs in fishing or tourism, they will be negatively affected by the coral bleaching. And also the fish and other organisms that depend on coral reefs for food and shelter will not find coral reefs in these habitats, so they will move to other habitat or they will die. So destroying coral reefs will cause change in the food web in the marine environment, and it will cause harm for the people who depend on coral reefs for fishing or tourism. Here we have give reason for. Coral bleaching happens when the water temperature rises because coral reefs get rid of algae. This is very important information, that the coral reefs get rid of the algae from their tissues and they turn completely into white, causing coral bleaching. The very important part in this answer, the first part, because the coral reefs get rid of the algae from their tissues. Okay? And this is make them turn completely into white and die. Here we have activity 8, plastic pollution. And this is one of the human activities that cause habitat loss in the marine ecosystem, as we will see now. As we already know, that the environmental changes and the human activities may negatively impact ecosystems. As a human activity, which is throwing plastics in marine environment, this impact or affect the environment and the habitat in the marine environment. So what are these effects of the plastic pollution in the marine environments? This what we will study now. The problem that the marine organisms can't differentiate between the real food and plastic. They can't know what is the food from the plastic. They can't differentiate between the real food and plastic. An example for that, like the sea turtle. Sea turtle can't differentiate between a jellyfish and a piece of plastic in the water. They eat a lot of plastic thinking that it is jellyfish, so they get harmed because they ate plastic, not jellyfish. So the word differentiate here, differentiate. Okay, so this is a verb and it has the meaning of know the difference. As here, the sea turtle can't know the difference between the food, the jellyfish, and the plastic. So the sea turtle eats a lot of plastic thinking that it is food. So throwing plastic into marine environments harm the marine organisms. And these plastic products may get broken down into smaller pieces. It is smaller than a rice grain, one rice grain. So the plastic products get broken down into smaller pieces, and this is called microplastics. We know that the term micro means very, very small. So the plastic products broken into very, very small pieces, which called microplastics. And these microplastics will harm another living organism in the marine environment, like the corals, as we will see now. We know that the corals are small marine organisms and they filter the seawater to get their food. With the meaning of filter, that the water comes inside them, okay, and they get the food from the water. So these seawater have microplastics, very small, very tiny pieces of plastic that goes to the coral, inside the coral, and they ingest these microplastics as pieces of food, so they get harmed. So the corals ingest microplastics as the food. So this is harm the corals, as we will see now. As you see here, this small plastic, which called microplastics, will filter with the water inside the coral, and the coral ingests them as food, and this will harm the coral. So while the corals filter water, they ingest microplastics. They take in microplastics as food, and this harm the corals. So we saw two examples for the plastic pollution, that the sea turtles eat plastic instead of the jellyfish, and the corals ingest microplastic, and this is harm the marine habitat. And we have notes here. Large quantities of plastic are thrown in the marine environment every year, most of them from the land, as the people throw the plastic into the sea and ocean. And we have note here, plastics are very harmful in the marine environment. And this is why, because they are toxic and sharp. So this is a very important question that comes in this part. Why, or give reason for, plastics are harmful in the marine environment? Because they are toxic and sharp. They hurt the marine living organisms. So because they are toxic and sharp. So of course, if the amount of plastic in the marine environment increases, what will happen? Yes, it will harm the habitats and organisms that live in them. Here we will have a habitat loss here. So to stop this, the people should decrease their use of plastic products or to recycle them, to use them again, okay, and not to throw them into the sea, okay. With this information, we finished our lesson, so don't forget to subscribe, like, and share my channel. Thank you for watching. See you next video, inshallah, and goodbye.